Hello and welcome to Come to Think of It, the podcast diary program on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Gerik, Deall, today's diarist. Thank you for joining me. There's the US cartoon show called American Dad, which is shown in Australia on the Channel 7 sub-channel entitled 7 Mate. The show was launched during the most reactionary years of the George W. Bush presidency, and the idea was to effectively parody the right-wing conservatism that was polluting the US at that period of time. The main character is Stan Smith, who works for the CIA and spends his time catching evil Muslim Arab terrorists, a passionate member of the Republican Party living in a very middle-class suburb in which everyone is white and upper class, and where the very essence of US rightism makes perfect sense to him. As the episodes aired, there is episode after episode where Stan is left red-faced with his racism towards Arabs and his homophobia towards his neighbours, and his ultra-nationalism is exposed for what it is. Stan is the butt of every joke, and it's clear that his Republican loyalty and the George W. Bush admiration is the driving force behind the show's very existence and popularity. And if we take a look at the episodes, and as the series has progressed through time, we note something very obvious and profound. After the extreme Bush rightism years calmed down, and as Republicanism dropped, from 2005 onwards, the show was less able to base its comedy on political material, and more it went in other directions, such as supernatural and apolitical and crude joke episodes. Stan Smith has a daughter, Haylie, and she is extremely confrontational and oppositional towards him and his political orientation. From the early episodes, it's made acutely clear that she is left-wing, despises Bush and everything he stands for, and is enraged by her father's admiration for Bush. The question that must get asked is, if Haylie is opposed to Republican Bush rightism, then what political orientation does she follow instead? It's the answer to that question that has angered me and forced me into presenting this podcast. The American Dad writers, when coming up with the character of Haylie, had an open gallery of which to pick from. For as long as Haylie was on the left, and for as long as she was a flexible and credible character to work into the plots of the episodes, i.e. she was left-wing enough that there was a profound contrast between her and Stan, then it was simply a matter of picking the exact nature of her leftism. But unfortunately, there was already one left-wing daughter that existed in the US cartoon scene, Lisa Simpson. Lisa is a leftist, sometimes oriented towards the soft left liberalism, sometimes towards the hard left of socialism. She is a vegetarian, she is a Buddhist, she recycles passionately, she is anti-US imperialism, she is anti-corporatism, she opposes Chinese tyranny, i.e. Free Tibet, and in the future she sells out her principles and becomes a Democrat and becomes president. Lisa has her good points and her bad points. She unfortunately buys into the myth that Buddhism is a religion of peace and non-violence and anti-consumerism, but her anti-corporatist politics, for example when she takes on Mr. Burns in The War of the Media, is admirable and wonderful. But of course, The Simpsons does not base its plot and characters on politics, and does not have the key tendencies around politics at all, and so it can be forgiven for whatever particular errors Lisa Simpson happens to have. The same cannot be said of American Dad. Its entire means of existence is based on politics. The characters are solely written for the concept of having political reasons for their behaviour, and the plots are written so that the rich political sub-meaning is always available. And so when it comes to the nature of Haylie Smith's leftism, the same forgiveness cannot be given to her that was towards Lisa Simpson. Haylie Smith is an ugly combination of liberalism and hippiedom anarchism. Firstly, to the former, she has left-wing politics, but they are always far too soft, and she never goes further with them to take more principled lines on the issues. Surely, for the show to be the most colourful and therefore the most entertaining, Haylie should have hard left politics, thereby having a completely black and white contrast to Stan. For example, a socialist or a libertarian socialist or something. When Stan goes to the hard right, Haylie takes the completely opposite line on the left. But instead, Haylie takes a soft left stance on a whole series of issues. There is a simple reason for this, and it comes down to the intention of the writers. They are far more interested in having plots where Stan and Haylie get into fights, and then having endings where they both reconcile their differences. And the only way to have their differences reconciled is they are as small as possible. Stan's rightism cannot be compromised for sheer common sense of the focus of the show, and therefore that means Haylie's leftism must be watered down and reduced so that it's easier for her to forgive her father. Instead of Haylie being an aggressive, colourful, flamboyant and uncompromising leftist, which would make for hilarious and amazing yelling matches between her and Stan, instead of that, she is reduced to being a pathetic democratic liberal. She is soft left, just like Rachel Maddow and Keith Olbermann, and she supports the Democrats when election times come around. For example, there was the US invasion of Iraq in 2003. A hard left-wing person would oppose the invasion and war and occupation of Iraq, and they would do so because they oppose US imperialism, and they would boldly oppose any act of US aggression. On the other hand, a soft left liberal would only oppose the invasion on the grounds that Bush lied about Saddam Hussein having weapons of mass destruction. In short, admitting that if the WMD really did exist, they would have supported the invasion. If you asked Haylie Smith about the invasion of Iraq and asked her why she opposed it, there is a guarantee her answer would have been the latter, the phony weapons of mass destruction. And that's all the time we have for today. This has been Come to Think of It on Bizz 99.9 FM Substitute Radio. I'm Gerik, no Deall. Thanks for listening to the program. Until next time, goodbye.